Sophie was recently accused of stealing valuable items from one of her clients. She was immediately fired from the cleaning company she works for. Sophie didn't know what was going on. She told her boss that she did not steal anything. Her boss had already called the police on her since there was video proof. But before we start, make sure to subscribe if you haven't and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. She felt she was wrongly treated. When the police came, they had no remorse. Sophie asked them why she was being taken in. They told her to wait until they got to the station. She demanded to speak to her lawyer. The officers told Sophie to watch the video first, because even a lawyer couldn't help her. Sophie was lost for words. Police showed her the footage of the theft. Sophie didn't recognize the woman in the video breaking in. She did recognize the house. This was the house of one of her wealthier clients, but she would never steal anything. The police then confronted her with more evidence. Her fingerprints were found. Sophie was dumbfounded. "I am being framed!" she screamed. But how did her fingerprints get there? And who is the person that is supposedly framing her? Sophie explained to the officers that she's been working for the cleaning company for several years. Last month, she was suddenly transferred to a new client. She thought this was weird, since she did not accept new clients. The new client was a rich banker. She immediately felt at home and accepted by his family. Sophie especially had a good connection with Anne, his wife. Sophie was hired for 2 times a week. She even got the key from the family since they trusted her so much. Sophie was told to only clean the ground floor. She thought this was strange. Anne would clean the other parts of the house. One day, Sophie went upstairs to ask Anne something. She heard some noises coming from what looked like the office. Sophie knocked and heard a gasp. Anne opened the door, trying to block Sophie's view. She looked shocked. Sophie didn't know what was going on. Anne quickly closed the door. Before closing the door, Sophie saw a glimpse of the office. A painting was moved. Behind the painting, there was something that resembled a safe. Sophie now realized there was probably something really valuable locked in that room. Ever since that day, Anne acted more and more suspicious to Sophie, like she did not trust Sophie. Sophie felt like she was being watched all the time. If the clients don't want her to go upstairs, she shouldn't. Sophie needed the money, so she decided to continue. When it was time to clean again, Sophie entered the house. Anne seemed suddenly really happy to see her. Sophie was suspicious of the change in behavior. Why did she behave like this all of a sudden? Sophie decided to just do her job like her boss told her. Then Anne asked something weird of Sophie. Anne asked Sophie to clean the upstairs rooms because she would be out of the country for an indefinite time. Sophie was totally baffled. There had to be something Anne wasn't telling Sophie. Anne told Sophie she would be paid double if she did what she asked. Sophie eventually agreed. Sophie decided to get to work. She cleaned every room, but was hesitant to go to the office. Everything went fine until she tried opening the office. The door was kind of stuck, so with some force, she opened the door. Sophie's mouth fell open when realizing what she saw. The painting was taken from the wall, and an impressive-looking safe was staring right at her. Sophie got a strange feeling cleaning the room. She was done for that day, but what happened the next day, no one could have prepared Sophie. Next day, early in the morning, Sophie got a call from her boss. She had to get to the main office as quickly as possible to explain herself. When entering his office, Sophie immediately felt like there was something truly serious happening. He told Sophie to sit down. He thanked her for her many years of delivering great work for the company. However, he ended with what Sophie was afraid of. She got fired. Her boss didn't want to get in specific details, but he told Sophie that he had just called the police and that they would take care of the rest of the situation. Sophie was accused of theft. Officers came into the office to take her to the station. Sophie did not struggle. She knew she was innocent. Someone had wrongly accused her. She told them they should talk to Anne. She would believe her innocence. She had worked for Anne for quite a long time now, and although she was their cleaner, they had a good connection until yesterday. Then they dropped a bomb on Sophie. There was no Anne. "What do you mean there is no Anne?" Sophie stuttered. The officers told Sophie that the man she worked for never had a wife. No one knew about an Anne. They thought Sophie made this woman up to cover for her actions. But Sophie wanted to get to the bottom of this. The officers thought Sophie was going crazy. She must have made this woman up. The police captain overheard the whole conversation and decided to let Sophie describe this Anne for a drawing so that they could help her calm down. They made sure the drawing was scanned in so that they could match it with possible known people in the police database. Sophie was shocked by the evidence they presented next. There was another piece of evidence that Sophie got confronted with, her fingerprints. Apparently, her fingerprints were found all over the house. Sophie knew that someone was going really far to cover their own track and make Sophie pay for it. It had to be done on purpose. She entered the interrogation room and got the shock of her life. Sophie immediately shouted that this was the woman that framed her. The captain calmed her down. The police captain started explaining the situation to Sophie because he saw how visibly shaken she was. This Anne is a well-known con artist. She had apparently seduced the wealthy banker with the intention to steal from him. Every time Sophie came to clean, Anne was upstairs trying to get into the vault, but it was more difficult than she thought. Eventually, she managed to break it open and steal everything inside. Anne carefully placed all the evidence to frame Sophie for this heist. She thought this was a waterproof plan. However, she did not realize that the police was already actively looking for her. When the computer got a match, they instantly activated Interpol. Anne was eventually caught trying to flee the country with the documents. She was planning on selling them to the highest bidder. Luckily for Sophie, they managed to get her in time. She eventually admitted to all of the crimes, including trying to frame Sophie. This solved one of the largest con artist cases in the country, and Sophie was almost a victim of this cunning woman. She had framed a lot of other people as well. These people were all released. Sophie was happy that she identified her.